Adelia, you asked me what my thoughts were about this closed primary bill, and I'm disappointed to hear that Chris Todd's closed primary bill, which I was a primary co-sponsor of, died today in Senate, State, and Local Government Committee. Obviously, we've got a problem across the entire state with Democrats crossing over and voting in our Republican primaries, typically with the goal to elect more moderate Republicans and try to deprive the state of a good conservative base of legislators in the General Assembly. So I'm a big proponent of closing primaries so we just have Republicans voting in Republican primaries, because we still do not have a General Assembly that on the whole is as conservative as Republican primary voters are across the state. And until we address the problem of crossover voting, it's going to be difficult to impossible for the people to get the kind of General Assembly that they have the right to. So I was disappointed to hear that.
I think we need to close the primaries. We've had a problem in the past with crossover voting, and with both parties, Republicans voting in Democrat voting in Republicans, and we just really feel like that if you're affiliated with one party, if you're, that you should be the ones that are nominating that person for that position. And the crossover voting, a lot of times they cross over to vote for the weaker candidate. I've ran into that myself before, and where they think that they can beat someone, so they only have one candidate in one party, and they have two in the other, so they don't have to vote in their primary, so they cross over and vote in the other primary and vote for the weaker candidate, then turn around and vote for their candidate in the general election. And we've seen it happen over and over. So I've always been for closing the primaries and making sure that Republicans are nominating Republicans and Democrats are nominating Democrats.
House Bill 886 and Senate Bill 777, they passed through your committee, House, State, and Local. How did you vote on that bill?
Oh, I voted for it. Well, I believe that Republicans ought to vote in Republican primaries, and Democrats ought to vote in Democrat primaries, and Whigs ought to vote in Whig primaries. And that, if you are going to be a Republican, you ought to be able to vote in that primary.
And that Senate bill just failed in State and Local there for lack of a second.
That's news.
Yeah, that's brand new news. Do you think something like the bill that was passed in your committee, do you think that could be brought back next year? What should Tennesseans expect?
Well, I think Tennesseans should expect to have access to their legislators to share their opinions, and I voted the way I think the people in my district would want me to vote, and I'm sure others have voted the way that they think that their district wants them to vote. I don't fault people for listening to the voters in their district. However they voted, everybody's got to vote their own conscience and how they feel like they understand the people in their community want them to vote. That's what I did.
I would be very much in support of the closed primaries. It seems sometimes we don't have the political will to take these things on. There are lots of folks in lots of our districts that have probably been lifelong Democrats and now only vote Republican. I think we've had some measures to accommodate that so that you could move into what makes more sense in today's time of crazy radical Democrats. But unfortunately, some of the weak, gutless Republicans don't want to take it up, and I think that's too bad. Lots of fear mongering about that of, oh, nobody will vote and we'll never get the right person elected and all those sorts of things. I discount those. I think it's the right thing to do. It's very much of let your no be no and let your yes be yes. And I think most of the Tennessee public that I'm around, I don't run in some of the elite circles, but most of them are sick up to their noses with politicians who tell them what they think they want to hear. And I think that tendency to be wishy-washy on everything is probably a common characteristic with those folks that don't want to close the primaries up because they want to be able to speak out of both sides of their mouth.
Well, I think we should be closing primaries in Tennessee. I don't understand how we can justify allowing non-members of a party, either party, come in and cast an equal vote to determine who the leaders of that party or the nominees of that party are going to be. Baptists don't let the Church of Christ come in and elect a new pastor. The Yankees don't let the Red Sox come in and pick a new manager. So I'm not really sure why we're allowing Democrats to select who the Republican nominee is going to be, or vice versa.
And do you think you'd have the same opinion if you were a Republican in a Democratic state?
Well, no, I think the same premise applies. I would not want members of another party to be able to come in and influence what type of candidates we put forward. Because, again, even Justice Scalia has acknowledged in dicta and in an opinion that he wrote dealing with a proposition in California that was overturned by his majority opinion. He said, in his opinion, and I'm paraphrasing here because I'm not going to get the quote just right, that one of the most fundamental actions of a party is to be able to determine who their nominee is going to be. And if we start allowing outside influences to come in one election cycle, could completely annihilate or ruin the party. And so if Justice Scalia is acknowledging that from the bench, I think we as members of the legislature should be acknowledging that threat here in Tennessee as well.